Hey, what's up? This is Sully from Godsmack. Strap on those boots, baby, because you are now in the trenches of the war room with the one and only Mistress Carrie right here on the Mistress Carrie podcast.
What's up? This is Joe Rogan, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Her hair so lovely, pretty eyes.
Hey, this is Brent from Shinedown, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie. Hey, Carrie, go put your bra on, girl.
Hey, this is Steven Tyler, and you be listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
What's up? This is Aaron from Stain, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Hi, everybody. This is Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, and you're listening to the one, the only Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is David from the band Disturbed, and you're listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
Hi, Bruce Dickinson here from Iron Maiden. Yes, indeed, Miss Whiplash herself, Mistress Carrie, is here to unchain your brain.
Hi, this is Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. You're listening to Mistress Carrie.
This is Dennis Leary. You are listening to my favorite, Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is Corey from Stone Sour, and you have the privilege of listening to Mistress Carrie. Oh, God. Oh, yeah.
Hey, it's Mistress Carrie, reporting for duty from MCHQ for episode 160 of the Mistress Carrie podcast. I am so excited about this week's guest, Marty O'Brien, who's a Rhode Island-born bass player that has had an unbelievable career, decades filled with great rock and roll stories. Marty is currently the bass player in Daughtry, and he and I reconnected in Vegas earlier this year. And as we started swapping stories about the late 90s, I was like, Marty, you have got to come on my podcast. Now, I've already had Chris Daughtry on the show a couple of times, but Marty and I go way back to the days of Kilgore, the Rhode Island band that broke in the mid to late 90s. Marty O'Brien has played bass for everybody from Tommy Lee to Lita Ford to Disturbed and Static X and then some. He was on the Ozzfest multiple times and has recorded with everyone from Chris Cornell to Celine Dion and Kelly Clarkson. Marty's been a touring bass player and a session player, and he checked in with me recently from Los Angeles, where he lives now, taking a little bit of vacation time off the road. And we got caught up about how we met and all of the different stories that have happened over the last 2+ decades of both of our careers. If you're a bass player or a fan of rock music, you are going to love this episode. Talking stories about everyone from Pantera to Extreme. Marty O'Brien has seen and done it all, and I'm so happy to call him a friend. So allow me to introduce you to Marty O'Brien. What's up, Marty?
What's going on over there on the East Coast?
Oh my God, it's so good to see you.
You too.
You don't get to say East Coast. You're an East Coast guy. You may live in the West Coast, but you're an East Coast guy.
I am very much an East Coast guy, but I'm saying, how's it going over there on the East Coast? I do miss it.
It's not bad. The weather, you know how it is. It's weird.
Yeah, it's weird out here. Like usually it's sunny every day. And it's just been gray and gloomy for a month. It's the weirdest thing.
Did you move to Seattle, West Coast? Which part of the West Coast?
Yeah. It's been like that a month. And everybody's talking about it too. They're like, what's with this? This is weird.
How do you...
People will come visit for a week and they're just like, what's going on with the weather? Yeah, it's crazy.
Whenever I have to go to LA for work, which isn't all that often, but every once in a while, the music business kind of has New York, Nashville, and LA as kind of the hubs.
Yep.
I can't handle it for more than 5 or 6 days because I'm just such I'm such a masshole that there are just things on the West Coast that I can't wrap my brain around. When did you move to LA and how was that transition? Because it couldn't have been easy.
It was. Everybody thought I talked funny as soon as I got here. Let's put it that way. What happened was in 1998, I was in the band called Kilgore, which you knew from back in the day.
Yeah.
And when I joined the band, they had just been chosen to go on the Ozzfest. So this was like a huge thing. Like local band is about to go on the Ozzfest, and I wasn't in the band at the time. And even I remember the feeling at the time. It was like what, these kids from Rhode Island are opening for Ozzy? Like, it was like, what are you talking about? Like, it was a huge buzz in the city. And it turns out just a couple weeks before they left for the Ozzfest, they needed to swap out their bass player, so they asked me to join just like 2 weeks before the Ozzfest. So that was like, talk about transition. I went from just playing in local bands to all of a sudden, like, we're opening for Megadeth and Tool and Ozzy every day around. It was talk about transition. That was just like, what is happening? But the move to LA was about a year and a half or 2 years after that, because the singer for Kilgore had left at the time, and the Kilgore's record label was based out of LA. It was Giant Records, part of Warner Brothers, and the management was out in LA. And they were all urging us, like, you guys need to move out here. Find a singer out here. We'll keep the ball rolling. It'll all be going good. And so the three of us, as a band, moved out to LA to find a new singer. And but we were only out here for 2 weeks, and I suddenly got the invite to audition for Tommy Lee's band at the time, Methods of Mayhem. So luckily, with the blessing of the other guys, because I got the email from my buddy. He was his buddy was the guy setting up the auditions, and he sends me this email and he says, "Hey, Tommy Lee's auditioning bass players for this Methods of Mayhem band. They're about to do the Ozzfest." And the email said, "How soon can you be in LA?" And I was like, I'm actually here. I just moved here like 2 weeks ago. So that's how that happened. And that's how I got out to LA was with Kilgore. But the first thought I got when I asked to audition for Tommy Lee was like, oh no, I just moved here with my band, and I remember I walked into the other room, and the drummer Bill, he's a massive Tommy Lee fan, obviously. And it's funny, is the week before I got the audition, he had just seen this Methods of Mayhem band at a TV show taping. We just got to LA and we were going to all these events and crazy stuff. And so he was on this buzz of like, I can't believe I saw Tommy Lee filming this thing. His new band is crazy. And so I go in the other room and I'm like, you won't believe this email I got. I just got asked to audition for Tommy Lee's band, Methods of Mayhem. And I'm thinking the guys are going to be like, oh man, we just moved here. Like, you're going to go audition for other people? And the thought immediately, they just looked at me and they were like, you have to do it. You have to do it. Like super excited. And they urged me to do it. So anyway, I did that. And that's how, so the Kilgore was what brought us out here. And then the ball started rolling with all other gigs for me once I got here. Yeah. But transition wise, yeah, it was definitely, everybody thought I talked funny. It was great.
Yeah. There's just a difference in like mentality and just the way we work and the way.
Oh yeah.
Like, I heard this. You tell me, because you're an East Coast guy. You tell me if this is accurate. I heard someone say this. I think it was on TikTok, that the difference between East Coasters and West Coasters is the difference between being nice and kind. So the example they gave was that if you got a flat tire and you were on the side of the highway, that a West Coaster would pull over and be like, oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. And they would be nice about it. And then they would leave you on the side of the highway. Yeah. But an East Coaster would pull over and go, the fuck you do? Oh, you got a flat tire? What are you, an idiot? Get out of the way. And they would change it for you. So they wouldn't be nice, but they would be kind. Is that accurate now that you've lived on both coasts?
You know, what's funny is if I visit back east and I see some of my buddies, or I'm on the West Coast and some East Coast guys come over, and there's always a funny moment where somebody, you'll say something or do something, and somebody will just be like, "Yeah, go fuck yourself," whatever, And then at first you're like, "Whoa," and then you realize like, "Oh, they're my East Coast buddies," where they can just tell you to go fuck yourself, and then like, "Hey, so you want to go get something to eat right after?" And it's an endearing "go fuck yourself."
Yeah, exactly. It's with love.
Yeah. But they'll mean it. Be like, there's something you said like upset them, and they don't agree, and they'll be like, And so there's a truth to that for sure. Yeah, they mean well.
I'm trying to remember, because you're one of those people that I've known for so long that I can't remember how long I've actually known you. Was it with Kilgore that I met you?
I can't remember if I met you during Kilgore, but I have a Mistress Carrie story. And I've told this story to people before. So just like a little recap of how this led into that was, I played for Kilgore. We moved to LA. As soon as we got here, I got the gig with Tommy Lee. And I had to learn those songs in just a few days. And the next thing you know, I'm on the Ozzfest. And so that was kind of like the buzz thing going on. Like on the Ozzfest, all the guys were like, I'd meet people in other bands and they'd be like, oh, so you're the guy that had to learn the songs in just a few days, huh? I go, yeah, it was crazy. Like, can you come down tomorrow for an audition? So it was kind of known that I was the guy that learned the songs quickly. So on that Ozzfest tour was Disturbed was on the second stage on their touring their first album. And I'd also done some festival shows with Static X. So I met those guys, right? So during that year, I'm friends with all these bands on the Ozzfest. And then the Tommy Lee tour ends. And then in 2001, Tommy Lee was like working on a new record and there's nothing going on. And the bass player for Disturbed, Fuzz, he broke his ankle. And he calls me one day. Now they're, that first album is blowing up. They're just like doing huge. And he calls me and he goes, hey, Marty, so I hear you learn those Tommy Lee songs pretty quickly. You think you could go with the boys to Europe and fill in for me? I was like, what? Yeah. So, at the drop of a hat, I was off to Chicago to jump on a plane with the Disturbed guys. And we went to Europe and did a European tour opening for Marilyn Manson and all that. And then 6 months after that, the bass player for Static X, my buddy Tony, he falls off his motorcycle and fractures his collarbone. And what's weird is he was coming to see me play a gig. I was doing like this jam band kind of thing with guys from like Cypress Hill and Jane's Addiction and stuff. And he came to the gig, he fell and he broke his collarbone. So Wayne Static calls me and says, hey, so is it true you learned all those Methods Mayhem songs really quickly and filled in within days? Yeah, he goes, you want to come with us to do this tour? So this is where I met you, or at least we had our first like in-depth conversation, And so that tour I did with Static X filling in was Pantera's last tour, that Reinventing the Steel tour, And now the first time we met was on Ozzfest, and we're in the back of the Great Woods amphitheater there, and you're interviewing Tommy Lee, and Tommy's like, let's all do it together, so like his band. And somehow you knew that I was like the local kid that was from Kilgore and was now and I'll never forget, you said, so wow, you got a local guy here in your band. And Tommy, what's that like? Marty's from the area. And this wasn't true, but Tommy goes, I met Marty's mom today and she looked me right in the eyes and said, I've seen your video. Referring to the
I know the video you're referring to,
Pamela.
Yeah.
And everybody burst out laughing, and that was live on WAF. Yeah. And then so like I said, I did that gig, and then the Disturbed and Static X gigs were because people broke bones and I had to step in and do the tour last minute. So that tour with Static X, it was Slayer and Pantera, that Reinventing the Steel tour. And I was at we were playing the Worcester Centrum, and you were out back, like by the loading docks and the trucks and all that. And you go, Marty O'Brien, oh, so you're here playing with Static X. Let's do a quick interview on the street. Now, by this time, this is my second gig that I'm now filling in for somebody with broken bones. And people were throwing jokes around like, what's going on with this? Like, everywhere you go, there's like, are you chasing ambulances or whatever? Now, at the time, Jason Newsted had just quit Metallica, and even I was like, that'd be a good gig for me, And you caught me on the street outside the Centrum, and you were like, Marty O'Brien, local kid playing the Worcester Centrum. What is this? That's crazy. And you said, and I tell people the story, they all laugh. And you said, okay, so 6 months ago, you filled in for Disturbed because the bass player broke his ankle. So now you're playing for Static X because the bass player broke his collarbone. And you said, so what we all are knowing here, what we're wondering is, what have you done to Jason Newsted? Are you putting hits out on bass players? Because what's going on? Yeah.
And you didn't. Jason Newsted's fine.
I did not, no. Yeah, he was fine. He just, I guess he left on his own or, whatever.
Yeah.
But I was trying to get that gig too. That was
Well, that was why when I saw you in Vegas playing with Daughtry, that I was like, I gotta get you
just recently.
Yeah, it was just recently. You and I like finally got to kind of reconnect in person, other than like social media posts and stuff. Because I'm so used to interviewing people that are in bands, especially that have been in bands for a long time, or it's their band. And you have this fascinating journeyman bass player story where not only are you a local New England guy, but you've literally played with everybody. And I was like, Marty, I got to get you on the podcast because I want to go through the whole timeline of your career, because you've literally played with everybody. It's like, you're that guy. Broken bone, call Marty. Bass player's got the flu, call Marty. Like, you caught your bass player banging your wife, call Marty. Like, Marty's the guy.
Right. I'll step in. Who needs it? It's, you know, what's funny is my whole career, it's always been like, it always seemed that the bigger the band was that I played for, the shorter the tour was. It was like, if I thought it was going to be like, and all my buddies were like longtime band members in bands. And they would record an album and they would go on tour for 2 years supporting that record, and they'd be on tour. And I'd be like, I joined Tommy Lee's band and we're on tour for like 6 months, hoping it's going to be 2 years. And then the next single doesn't do so well. And then the tour support is pulled, and then there's no more touring. And then, like, you know, then there's a Static X gig and then Disturbed gig. And every band, it was always like maybe I'd play with them for like a year. And it wasn't that I just left. It was just the job. They needed me for that time. And then I would just move on. But what I really always wanted was to be, I wanted to be in a band, that long-term 20-year band guy on all the records and all that. And I always felt like, you know, the grass is always greener. I always felt like, oh man, if I could just find like a band, you know, like all these different gigs are great. But now that I'm older and I look back and I almost think like, you know, thank God they all ended, because I would rather have the facets of all the different artists and all the different bands than just, you know, because I see some of my buddies and I think about it like, wow, like even though I always wanted to be in a band the whole time, to look back and be like, this is the only band I played with, would be like, oh no, I'd rather have like that giant long list.
It's like getting married as a virgin. This is the only girl I'm ever going to get to bang for the rest of my life.
Yeah, and actually, what I'm most proud of all of it is the diversity, because like, and you know, sometimes I see the list of people that I've played for, because it's both recording sessions as well as live bands. And I love when they skip each other and they look kind of, because it'll say Disturbed, Celine Dion, Static X, Kelly Clarkson, you know, like it's all like all over the place. And because usually in the recording session world, if you're, you know, if you're pegged as like some metal player, there's no chance in hell you're going to play on a Kelly Clarkson record or something like that. Just because the producers, they just like, you know, and so I'm that's what I'm most proud of, is like that I wasn't kind of pegged, that I was just kind of known to come in and do whatever was needed, you know. So that's why I'm on kind of the random pop albums as well as the metal stuff, you know. That's what I'm most proud of. So that's why I've been all over the map.
Well, I want to go back to the beginning of your musical career and go back to the beginning, because there's a lot of career to like dig through. I'm like an archaeologist right now. I got my shovel. So are you originally from Rhode Island?
From Rhode Island. Grew up in Pawtucket.
In the bucket.
And I grew up in the bucket. Used to listen to all the local radio stations. I worked some jobs and just put the headphones on and worked the regular gigs. And but I always played in local bands, you know, like there were a core group of guys that I played with, and the band name changed a few times, but it was always like the same core guys and get a different singer. So I always trying to do it, you know. And
did you start playing guitar first? Or
no, it was always bass. Yeah.
Geddy Lee had a really funny quote. He said, nobody ever starts playing the bass. They always play guitar, and then they join a band and they need a bass player, and then you get chosen to be the bass player.
Nope. I fell in love with the frequency of it, like the low end, the fact that you could feel it in you. It hit me right away. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Guitars everything else is kind of all up here. Like the bass comes in, and I was just like fascinated that it was like it felt, and so yeah, I grew up in Rhode Island, and here's the crazy story. I don't think I've ever told this one before. Is that at one point, after playing in local bands for like 8 years, and just playing in front of like 40 bands, I mean, playing in front of like 40 of your friends, nothing ever really grew into anything big. I had this career switch in my head where I just wanted to tackle graphic design, and I was going to go back to school for graphic design. And I had actually quit my local band, and I was just like, I'm just done. I'm going to go to school for this graphic design. And I quit my band after years, and all my friends were like, you just quit? You're not going to play? And everybody couldn't believe me, but I was actually truly happy for the first time in my life. And instead of having this dream that was like unreachable of music, I finally had this idea of like, hold on, I can study graphic design and get into that world. And I actually was already doing it on the computer and already loved it. And wouldn't you know it, as soon as I made that choice, right? So Kilgore was a local band that these guys were a few years younger than me. So they weren't part of our exact scene. I was more in like played more metal bands that kind of sounded more like Queensryche and stuff like that, And these Kilgore guys were kind of more like the hardcore scene, but we go see this band, and the shows would be packed, and I mean 1,000 kids crawling on each other, singing every word, and even me and my friends were like, "What is this?" Like, I mean, you felt like you were at a national act show. Like I remember there were security guards stopping people from trying to go backstage, and I was like, "This is like a local band."
And you're talking about like mid-90s, right?
Yeah, mid-90s, like 90.
Scene was just insane then,
yeah,
especially in New England.
96, 97, and then 98 rolls around. I'll never forget getting that call. Like, did you hear? Like, Kilgore is on the Ozzfest. I was like, we were like, what? Like, and I actually said, like, the only band to come out of Rhode Island is John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band, like 20 years ago. Like, what is happening right now? So I mean, I'm just being like, that is insane. So,
and Ozzfest, for anybody that may not have been old enough to go, right?
It was huge.
Ozzfest was, if you were a new band and you got picked to be on the second stage, I mean, you were talking about Disturbed, Slipknot, like it was this launching pad for bands that if you could get on the Ozzfest, it was like the rest of your life was already planned out. You were destined to be a rock star. And there was a track record to prove it.
Prime example, every day on the Ozzfest, Kilgore, every day before us was System of a Down, and every day after us was Incubus. So that lets you know. And System of a Down was in a beat up like RV, and Incubus was in an old 70s looking tour bus that we used to call the Journey bus because it looked like the old tour buses in the Separate Ways video. And so they were picked on the Ozzfest, and now I've made my decision that like I'm gonna follow this graphic design path in my life, and I'm sick of unloading gear up in Boston at 3 a.m, lifting my bass cabs into the back of my truck, and having to be at work at like 7 a.m. Like I was actually done. I was like, ugh. And I'll never forget, I went out to a club in Providence, and I hadn't been out in a few months because I kind of was removed from the music scene. And the guitar player for Kilgore walks in, and it was in this club when there was only like 4 people in the whole place playing pool. And he walks in, and he just has this look on his face. And I didn't realize why he suddenly looked at me with his eyes open. And the fact was, they were looking for me. They wanted to ask me to join the band. They had seen me play in other bands, but nobody had my number, and they didn't know where to find me. So they just went to any clubs that they might have seen me at.
That
and he was shocked to see I was
so far from the realm of comprehension for people in this day and age.
Yeah, exactly.
That you didn't have a cell phone. You didn't have email. There was no social media. People did not get a hold of you.
This was 98. So he walks in with this weird look like, whoa. And this is a guy, he was playing in Kilgore at the time. So anytime I would see him, he would just be like, oh, hey bro, how are you? Like he knew who I was, but we never have chats. And he walked right up to me and he's like, "Hey, so who you, right away, he got right to it. So who are you playing with now?" I said, "I actually quit my band. I kind of just laying low for a bit, nothing going on." He's like, "Really, could I get your number or we'll talk about something?" I was like, "Sure." And then he left right away. And then it suddenly hit me like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, they're doing the Ozzfest. Like, what does this mean? And so I talked to them the next day and they said, "Hey, you want to come down and jam with us?" So I learned 2 of their songs. And the next day I went down and just played 2 songs. So I told you, I'd quit my bands. I was done, I played 2 songs with them and they just look at each other like, "Oh, okay." And they go, let's go outside and talk. Like, all right. So we go outside and talk and they go, "Here's the deal." They go, "We're leaving in like, I think it was something like 10 days for the Ozzfest." And they go, "We are swapping bass players. We need a new guy and we want you to come with us." And I was like, "All right, let's go." And they said, "Whoa, wait a minute. Like we heard you have a job and like we noticed you drive that nice truck. I'm sure you have a payment. We don't make a lot of money. We just want you to think about it, And I was like, "Let's go." And they go, "That's it. Let's go." I said, "Let's go." And 10 days later, I'm in a van heading out to do this. We did like a week of shows leading out to the West Coast. Then we started on the Ozzfest. And here's the funny thing is, I wasn't familiar. I knew about the Ozzfest because it already happened like 2 years in a row already. But I really thought the second stage meant that like you'd play in front of like 300 to 500 people that were going to get a hot dog in between seeing the real bands on the main stage. That's really what I thought it was going to be.
And that is not what the second stage of Ozzfest was.
The first, oh my Lord, the first shows was, I believe it was Holmdel, New Jersey. Two shows we played 2 shows at the same venue 2 days in a row. I'll never forget. They had the stage set up. And there was a big open area and then a big grassy hill that went over, kind of like Great Woods. And on the other side of the hill was the amphitheater. And I believe it was Seven Dust or Soulfly was playing. And we could hear them playing. And we're kind of like tuning up and getting ready. And they go, "Okay, guys, get ready. You're almost up." And then we heard the music stop in the crowd. And then I heard the announcer say, "All right, give it up for Seven Dust or Soulfly," whoever it was. They said, Now head over to the second stage for Kilgore." And we just like 4 count, just start going into it. And just thousands of people come over the hill. It looked like a scene from like Braveheart. And we're playing and there was dust coming up because they were like coming over the hill. And there must have been 15,000 people at the second stage. Giant pits, dust bowls. But I was like, what is this?
This is why I wanted to have you on the show, because your career is so banana pants that your first tour was on the Ozzfest, playing after System of a Down and before Incubus.
Yeah, and every day that the time slots would change every day. So if you played at noontime on one day, the next day you'd play at 1. So all the bands would move. So System of a Down before us, Incubus. So if we played at noon, then the next day play at 1, 2, 3, I think then 4 was the last time slot.
It rotated to give all the bands a chance, except for the headliner of the second stage.
Motorhead headlined that stage, but all the other bands rotated. But once you finish playing like the 4 o'clock slot, the next show you'd play on the main stage. And that seems amazing, but there was nobody at that stage. Like you played in front of because as you know, those people that paid like $300 to see Ozzy in the first 10 rows, they're not showing up till like 7 p.m. They couldn't give a fuck about young bands. But they don't let the young fans that with the lawn seats come down to fill the seats. So we'd play in front of like very few people. But I also will never forget the first time playing in an amphitheater, even just the sound check, playing my bass, doing a sound check through the PA of a giant amphitheater, like
through Ozzy's PA.
Like what? Yeah, I was like, what is happening? Yeah, so that was cool. And so that was the start of the Ozzfest. And so those 15,000 kids coming up over the hill, that was my entire summer. And you're hanging out with all your bands you love. I had this I had this routine. I told you there was nobody in the seats in the first like 30 rows because nobody showed up till like 7. I had a routine. I would go into catering and I would get a piece of cheesecake around like 2:30 p.m. or something like that. And I would go to the main stage and I would find a seat. I didn't get too close because I don't want the band to see me like, who's this idiot eating cheesecake? I'd sit about like 10, 20 rows back and I'd eat cheesecake while watching Tool every day in 1998. That was my routine, Tool and cheesecake.
Oh my God.
I'm sure if somebody has some photos of the crowd, you'll probably see me because it was almost every show. Yeah. Oh, here's a really good one about that tour. So Megadeth was on after Tool. And now Sharon Osbourne obviously was the queen that just ran the whole thing, but this is before the TV show. So she could walk around the crowds. Nobody had any idea who Sharon Osbourne was. Now she's a TV star, but at the time you only knew who she was if she was if you were in one of the bands. And so I'm this green young kid from Rhode Island that had never toured in his life, and all of a sudden I'm on the Ozzfest and I'm just eating it up, of course. So I'm talking to Sharon Osbourne, and you could tell she took a liking to me, I think, because I was so green. She probably got a kick out of the fact that I was like, wow, this is crazy. And she was talking about something about like, oh, well, when you watch Ozzy from the side of the stage, it's a whole nother entertainment value right there or something. And I was like, I said, because I would watch bands from the side of the stage, the main stage. But I said, I go, with our passes, once Megadeth goes on, I said, they close off even the catering area. I go, second stage bands, we can't go even pass through catering. And she goes, come with me. And she takes my hand and walks me like a little kid, because I was a little kid, walks me into this production office. And she opens the door, and there's a guy named Steve Varga, who I'm still friends with, this guy from Australia, but he apparently must have managed the production office or something. So, but I didn't know by the time. She opens the door, and obviously just trying to make me feel like I was a little important or something, because I was just this kid. And she opens the door and she looks at Steve Varga and points at me and says, this is Marty O'Brien from the band Kilgore. She says, give this man a universal laminate. And now the universal laminate, the only people that had the laminate that said universal was Ozzy's family and his band. And like when you saw the piece of paper that showed all the security passes for the security guards to know what was what, it was like this giant grid of passes, but it went up to a pyramid, and at the very top it said universal, and under it said anywhere, anytime. It was like, don't mess with anybody.
For anybody that's never been backstage at a show, and it was magnified because it was the Ozzfest, that the passes aren't the same. There are people that are working. There's people that can just go after the show's over, or there's a VIP section for VIPs. And having been backstage at so many Ozzfests over the years, because there were so many bands, and some of the bands were really new, up to like a guy like Ozzy, they had to limit who got access to what, because otherwise, because all those second stage bands that were making crap money would have been backstage eating Ozzy's food. They would have been running around on Ozzy's stage while there's pyro going off. So like, it's that scene in Wayne's World when Wayne and Garth get the all access laminate at Alice Cooper. This is what you are getting handed.
Yeah, the ultimate pass that says anywhere, anytime. And so that was 98, right? And I'm just going to flash forward quickly. 2 years later, I was on another Ozzfest with Tommy Lee. And I made a joke about like, oh man, I had the Universal laminate last time. And Sharon Osbourne walked me into the production office, gave me another Universal laminate, and that one says Marty Osbourne is the name on it.
No way!
Yeah, but to go back to 98, on the Ozzfest 98 tour, one day I was standing waiting for a restroom that was kind of near the catering, and Adam, the guitar player from Tool, who I didn't know, but I was just, didn't want to bother him. He's standing next to me, and he's waiting, and he could probably just tell that I'm just one of the kids that plays on the second stage. And he goes, how'd you get a Universal laminate?
Because Adam Jones from Tool doesn't even have one.
Yes, he has. I mean, his dressing room is probably right down the hall from Ozzy's, but mine was the one that said like, and so that was kind of funny. So you said like your career is this crazy thing. It is a very crazy that I was on 3 different Ozzfest tours with a different band each time. 98 was Kilgore, 2000 was Tommy Lee's band Methods of Mayhem, and then 2002 was with Tommy Lee's solo band. And so just all over the place with that. Here's a funny Pantera story is that, younger kids these days are like, wow, you got to see Pantera back in the day? And I almost feel bad telling the story. I was like, I hate to say it. I think I've actually watched over 90 Pantera shows. And they're like, what do you mean? So in 2000 on the Ozzfest, we were on the main stage with Methods of Mayhem, and Pantera was on that stage. So that was the summer of 2000. Got to know those guys. So 6 months later, just 6 months later, maybe close to a year later, the following summer, Pantera is still on tour promoting that Reinventing the Steel album. But now I'm playing for Static X, opening for Pantera again. So I opened for Pantera on 2 different tours, but they were still on their Reinventing the Steel tour. So I played in 2 different bands on 2 different legs of Pantera tours. And I was a huge Pantera fan, so I would watch every show. And usually from right on the side of the stage. And I mean, it was crazy. Rex would even be like, he'd come over to the side of the stage during a quick break, drink some water. He'd be like, how's my amp sound? I'm like, sounds great. He goes, you got to hear it out front. He goes, go sit in front. Go sit in front of the amp. I was like, what? And he goes back out and he plays a song. And he's looking at me doing this. Like, and I'm like, what is he doing? And his tech, Sterling, goes, he wants you to go sit in front of the amp. I'm like, during their show on stage? Like, what are you talking? And I can see Rex, he's playing, he's looking back going, like you got to hear this thing. That's what he's telling me. And so Sterling, the tech, was just like, go ahead. So I felt retarded. But in the middle of a Pantera show, some kid runs out and just sits down in front of the amp. And Rex is playing some huge Pantera song.
Your face is melting.
Yeah, he's looking back at me going, yeah, right. I'm like, this is retarded. What am I doing here? Yeah. So that was fun. So that's my Pantera story, that I was on 2 different tours. Yeah.
I knew that mid to late 90s nu metal era in music was going to come back.
Yeah.
Because a few years ago, younger kids that would see me at shows or would text the radio station or email or whatever. This was even before WAF got sold, but definitely since COVID and the podcast and all of that, because a lot of these old stories are coming up on the podcast now.
Yeah.
And people are like, wait, you saw such and such a band? Wait, you met so-and-so? And it's unbelievable to me that this new generation of rock fans looks at the opportunity to see bands like, Pantera or the early days of Tool or early System of a Down, or a lot of people don't think Incubus was like a hard rock band, but in the early days they were. Like, all of those bands, people are like, you got to see all the, and like all the photo galleries that I have up on social media. When I started digitizing the old film camera photos, people would lose their minds at the bands that when I met them were all new bands.
Yeah.
And now they're the pillars of rock now.
Speaking of, when I joined Kilgore, it was such a quick thing. I had to learn the songs quick. And the first 2 shows we did was we drove to New York City and just did one quick show. But the second show, the second night, I was only in the van for like 10 days. It was right before we left on the tour. We did like a CD release party at Lupo's in Providence. Now, this is Kilgore. It's the big buzz band because we're about to leave on the Ozzfest. You know who the opening bands were that night of like basically my first? At 7:15 p.m., Stained went on, and they were just a local band that was, I think they just gotten signed, but nobody, it was just like, we heard like, wow, you signed a deal? Wow, like you're going to be recording? That's great. They went on 7:15. Another Providence band, State of Corruption, went on after that. Then it was Nothing Face, Godsmack, and Kilgore headlining. And I remember the Godsmack guys, like, I knew that there was like a song getting played locally, but I remember one of the Godsmack guys being like, wow, man, hey, have fun on the Ozzfest. Hey, if you ever need somebody to open for you again, like, let us know. Yeah, cool. It's like, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that'd be awesome, man. And then like we went into the Ozzfest, and then like we come back, and like Godsmack is massive.
Oh yeah, whatever, hit the radio and it just took off.
Yeah, but it was already buzzing at the time because there was a buzz at that show, but they were opening for us at the time. Of course, they would never now because So yeah, back then, like, it was exciting. Like a new band would come out, especially on the Ozzfest, and you're like, whoa, we got to go see these bands because you never know which one is going to be.
And there were so many great bands, like just in that, that first Ozzfest that you did with Kilgore, and you're talking about, going every night and seeing Megadeth and Tool and like all System of a Down and Incubus. Like, it's easy to look back now and be like, well, yeah, obviously those bands are all great. But all of these bands, this wave, it was a tsunami all at the same time. These bands all hit. And it was like, whose ever song hit the radio, whoever, oh, you're going to open up for them this time around. Next time they're opening for you. Like, it was just that time in music. And this is when I started on the air. I started at AAF as an intern in 91. In 94, I got hired in the promotions department part-time to like drive the van and hand out bumper stickers.
Yeah.
But I started on the radio in April of 98. So before you left on that summer Ozzfest, so being the night jock, which is where all the new bands started.
Wow.
My career started with this tsunami wave. Like Seven Dust was a brand new band. They had come out the year before, and like Korn and Limp Bizkit. Like the music scene, the way that it exploded from Seattle in the early 90s, nu metal wasn't as centralized, but it was just undeniable.
Yeah, it was huge.
And
so we started
we
doing
came
our
up together
thing around the same time.
Yeah.
It was exciting times. Crazy to think how long ago that was.
I know, which is why I was like, oh my God, I have to have Marty on the show, because you and I's careers have continued and gone in ways neither one of us could have imagined.
All over the place, yeah.
And looking back at it, like eating cheesecake, watching Tool, like every night, and like waiting for the bathroom next to Adam Jones. Like now Sharon Osbourne, everybody knows who she is, but like that she kind of adopted you as like a son and gave you like your first all access pass. Like, this is just ridiculous.
And I have to tell this story because I've been telling that past story for years. And then maybe like 6 or 7 years ago, I ran into her again. So now the story has another funny twist because I tell the people the story about it, and they're like, oh, okay, we heard it already. You got your Marty Osbourne pass and all that stuff. But here's a funny twist is, so I did the Ozzfest 98. I got the Universal laminate, and then Ozzfest 2000, my Universal laminate said Marty Osbourne, so you would think like, oh, you must be really good friends with her, and she took me under her wing and was so nice. Like I remember one time when we played Great Woods on that Ozzfest, actually, I think it was Ozzfest 2002, because I'd come around, twice, different Ozzfest. And the guest list tickets were just like lawn seats. And I said to Sharon, I said, hey, any chance, are there any tickets I could get a ticket from my mom, or my family's here? And I ran into her later in the day, and she like pulled out tickets out of her shirt, and she like gave me these tickets. And so it's just very cool like that. But here's the funny part is, about like 7 years ago or so, I ran into her at the Roxy. Now, I hadn't seen her in 20 years, and I look different. I got a beard now, and I'm not the young kid, the little kid that she knew back then. and she's walking towards me. It was a Black Label Society show, and she's walking towards me. And I just quietly said to her, I said, "Hi, Sharon." I said, it's Marty from Tommy Lee's band. You remember me? She's very honest. She just put her hand on my forearm and says, "Sorry, no." I'm sure if I like went into more detail, like, remember I played for Tommy Lee and you gave me the pass, like, oh, that maybe if I showed her a photo of what I looked like back then, but
she's been managing Ozzy's career and her own for decades. Like, there's just no way she can remember everybody she meets. That's so funny. So I just noticed, I'm in MCHQ, my studio, and I just noticed I have an old Ozzfest poster on the wall. So Great Woods got named the Tweeter Center. And that's Ozzfest 2001. Listen to the lineup. Black Sabbath, Marilyn Manson, Slipknot, Papa Roach, Linkin Park, and Crazy Town.
Wow. I was at that show.
Headlining the second stage, Disturbed.
I didn't play that show, but I was at that show just hanging out. I was just for fun. I was rolling on Disturbed's bus for like a week during that tour. I just went and hung out on the tour.
Yeah, as you do when you're Marty Osbourne.
But I had to tell that story about like, you know, people think I'm bragging. Oh, you know Sharon Osbourne so well. Well, about 20 years later, she didn't remember me. So
I know Sharon. Sharon doesn't know me.
That's all right. I had to tell that story.
All right, so you end up with Kilgore, then with Methods of Mayhem, and then Tommy Lee comes out with his solo band, and you go back out on the Ozzfest again in
I do 2002.
Yep. And then what happens? Because I need to get to Celine. Like, I need to get to how this pop stuff started.
This is good. So because the Tommy Lee gig would be like, okay, we're going to be on tour for like 2 years. This is great. And then the tour ends up being 6 months. And then it's like, well, what am I going to do now? You know? So I really wanted to get into the recording session world, you know? And I thought that, wow, now that I have like Tommy Lee and Static X and Disturbed like under my belt, I'm thinking like, well, I should be able to use this stepping stone kind of thing into the recording world too. And I quickly learned that nobody wanted to hear anything. Just as you'd expect. Like, you're kind of pegged as like you play for Static X. You're not gonna come here and play on this pop record, or you know. And you got kind of that attitude. And then I learned, like, there's a popular saying that you'll get session work when a session player dies. That's kind of true, because like there's just a few bass players that play on everything. But then I learned that like the people who play on everything, it's like the buddy of the producer who, you know, obviously they play on a record. They're obviously a skilled player. That player the producer likes their playing and likes him as a person. And I always joke, I said, if you're at the producer's barbecues, you're on his records too. You know what I mean? It's like hanging out. So I always wanted to get into that world. And if I could actually not tour and just be the guy to just like record on all these records, I thought that would be so cool too, you know? And, Evanescence, right? So Evanescence comes out, and that first single was out. And I think the record hadn't even been out yet. And I somehow ended up with like a CD sampler that had like 3 songs or something like that. And I heard those first 3 songs, and I remember thinking like, wow, like this is really cool. And I think this is in the days of like message boards and things like that.
Yeah,
and I came across
the internet
music.
Was still new.
Yeah. And like, anyway, I remember seeing that Ben Moody from Evanescence was like communicating with people and fans. It was like out of some kind of message board or something. And I emailed him through that. And I just said, hey, you know, love these songs that you wrote, you know, because he was like, it was obvious he was the main songwriter. And I just remember reaching out and just being like, hey, and I probably made some comment like, if you ever need some bass or whatever, you know. And I never heard back from him. He said, I love this sampler that I have, and you know, this is really different stuff. And I never heard back from him. So like a year goes by and Evanescence is already the biggest band. They just blew up. He's only like 20 years old, but the thing blew up so big. And then he quit the band. And I run into Ben Moody outside the Viper Room in Hollywood. And I'm like, hey man, I said, my name's Marty. I play for Tommy Lee and a few other people. And I said, man, I came across before the album even came out, I came across this like sampler. And I said, I actually emailed you. And his eyes lit up and he goes, I got that email. He goes, I brushed it off. Like there's no way like this guy that plays for all these people was like saying he brushed it off and didn't reply because he thought that it was just some sort of like somebody was messing with him. He was like, oh my God, I remember that email. Anyway, that was kind of a funny moment. So he either had just quit Evanescence or he was about to or something like that. So we hit it off and like hung out that night and exchanged numbers and all that. And then some time went by and he calls me up and he says, hey, I left Evanescence and I'm in town recording. I'm writing songs with Avril Lavigne right now. He goes, hey, you want to hang out later tonight after the session? Sure. So anyway, I hung out with him. And then like a month later, he says, hey, I'm back in town again. I'm writing songs. This is hilarious. He says, I'm writing songs with Kelly Clarkson. You know who that is? And I go, no, I don't know who that is. And he goes, she's on that American Idol show, you know? And she was the first person that was either she had just won or was about to win.
She was the first winner, yeah.
Now, it's hard to imagine people being like, I've never heard of American Idol. But it was so new that when you mentioned it, it wasn't like Coca-Cola. Like it just, you know, like the brand it is now. When you brought up her name, people would say like, oh yeah, isn't that girl that won that contest show? Like they would say it like that because they had.
Yeah, because so now there's 50 contest shows, but back then it was just that one.
Yeah, and nobody had won the show and had proven that you could win the show and actually be a real artist in the real world. Like it seemed so removed from the real world. It was like, oh, cool. And so he goes, hey, I'm writing songs. He goes, will you come play on these demos? It's like, yeah, sure. So I go by a studio and like late at night, I just play on these like 3 songs that he's writing for Kelly Clarkson. And then like a week later, he calls me again and says, hey, I'm back in town again. And he says, Clive Davis loves the demos we did. And we have the budget now to re-record the songs all over again, but like the big budget, you know, the big full album. He goes, do you want to do it? And I was like, yeah, of course. So I go into the studio and I record these same 3 songs. I got paid twice to play the same song. So I play the next song and I just brushed it off because like I said, it was a TV show, but it wasn't. And when I would tell people, oh, what have you been doing? Oh, I did a session the other day for this Kelly Clarkson. Isn't that girl that won that contest show? Yeah, it's that thing, you know? And then all of a sudden that Since You've Been Gone song, Since You've Been Gone, I didn't play on that song, but that song came out and that was the most played song at radio, I think in 2004. And anyway, that album blew up. It sold like 8 million copies or something like that. And it went from like, isn't that girl that won that contest show? If I mentioned it anywhere after that point, they were like, you played on that? Like, oh my God. So it was huge. It was a massive album and it was like a big thing for me, you know? And one of the songs I played on was a song called Because of You, which ended up being a huge #1 hit for her. And I just think it was funny that like this random, hey, will you just come play on this thing? And it was like the biggest thing ever. So what I learned is, you know, the joke about you'll get a session when a session player dies, that's the case. Or you can get in with a young producer that's only like 21 years old and doesn't have his players yet. So I became his player for bass. And from that point on, I would just play on everything he did. So a lot of the pop stuff I did in the early days of back then, Celine D. He wrote and produced a few Celine Dion songs. I'm on some of that stuff.
And what's funny is that people might think that are just fans of Evanescence that don't understand how the business works.
Yep.
That he's the guy, and then he left the band and like never had a career again.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, he's working with everybody. He's just not in Evanescence anymore.
Yeah, just amazing songwriter. He's one of those guys that just like, he'll plug a guitar in with his headphones and you can't really hear what he's doing. He'll like chunk, 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 come up with something, and then he'll layer another track and then layer another track. And in like 3 minutes, he'll unplug the headphones so you could hear it on the speakers. And you're like this little thing he just whipped together sounds like a hit song. You're just like, oh my God, like truly amazing. Yeah. So all sorts of stuff. But then, I mean, and then obviously once I played on the Kelly Clarkson thing and it was sold 8 million copies, and I would even just get random emails from people like, hey, I'm a producer. I'm from Germany, but I'm coming into LA to record, and I want a certain sound, and I saw your name in the credits. Are you available for these dates? Like, it just led to all sorts of other sessions and new, just random, I can't tell you how many female pop singer sessions I played on back then, because I have like a box. It's like a filing cabinet box with just, every time I play a recording session, I chart out the song, just, not like musical notation, just kind of chart out the basic notes. And at the top, I always write the date, what bass I played on it, what studio it was at, so it's like and then I put it in this file. And wow, one day I went through these and I was like, I don't remember. I forgot, it's just like random girl singers, pop stuff that just never came out. And so it made me realize, like, wow, like those early sessions on those pop albums led to so many other things, even though they weren't released, you still got paid to play on it,
And that's a whole, like, I talked to Jelly Roll about the Nashville kind of songwriting thing.
Yeah.
Because there's so much music getting made that people don't even know exists. These pop records that you're playing on that they never got a deal, they were demoed, and nothing ever happened to them. But there's a whole system of musicians and recording engineers that are working and getting paid, even though some of the stuff that they worked on never ends up being something that you hear on the radio.
Yeah. Or a song that gets written and it never takes off, or it never gets released, and then somebody pulls it out of the archives 15 years later and like, oh yeah, Keith Urban recorded my song that you always hear these stories like it was something I wrote like 5 years ago. I just pulled it out of the archives and it became a number 2 song or whatever, Yeah, it's amazing.
So you played with Kelly Clarkson. Did you get to record with Celine, or did you just play on her record? Did you get to meet her?
I never got to meet her. I met Kelly Clarkson a couple times in the studio. She would come and hang out and stuff like that. That was fun. But the Celine thing, oh yeah, she's super cool. And the Celine thing at the time, it was when she was doing the residency in Vegas, and where they had built a whole theater for her. And so she was working in Vegas. So we recorded my bass tracks here in LA, and then they took the hard drives to Vegas, and she recorded her vocals in the Palms Hotel. There's a recording studio, or maybe there was a recording studio in the Palms, and she did her things in there. So I've never met her. I hope to meet her someday though, and be like, hey, by the way, I played on your songs.
Vegas was one of those places that had a reputation after the Rat Pack that's kind of where like people went at the end of their career when they were kind of has-beens. And because she had little kids and wanted to have a stable life, Celine was one of the people responsible with making those Vegas residencies cool
that
again.
was one of the, it was like a big extravaganza,
Because she just didn't want to tour because she was a mom and had young kids and wanted them to have a stable life. So she's like, I'm just going to set up in Vegas and you can come to me.
So, how you asked me, did you ever get to meet Celine? Because I get that asked a lot. Like, so when you do these big pop records, like you don't really meet the people usually. And I go, yeah, sometimes they pop in, sometimes. But I have a good one where I didn't think I was going to meet the person, and I met the person in a strange way. This was a good one. So my, I can't remember what year this was, maybe 2007 or something like that. So I get a call like, hey, can you head down to Henson Studios? And Henson Studios is
I'm a psychotic Muppet fan, so I need to just
I need to
soak it in. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
So So the very famous Henson Studios used to be Charlie Chaplin Studios, and then it became A&M Studios through the 70s and 80s, and then it became Henson Studios. But in the 70s and 80s, I mean, I think parts of like Pink Floyd, The Wall, and like Michael Jackson's Thriller, and like the music video for We Are the World is in the big sound stage. I mean, just it's one of the biggest, most famous recording studios. So I get this call, hey, can you come down and play on this track, on this song? Yeah, sure. So I get the call and I go down there, and it's for Chris Cornell, right? And I'm thinking, cool, Chris Cornell. I get to record it with Chris Cornell. And I'm thinking it's with the songwriter producer, this guy Brian Howes. So I'm thinking I'm not going to get to meet Chris Cornell. He's probably not going to be there, but that'd be cool if he was. So I go to Henson Studios, right? Now, you know, recording studios have these huge, thick doors. It takes a lot of weight to open them, you know? So I look in the little window and I see the producer and the engineers. They're like listening with their heads bobbing in front of the mixing board. So I open up the big door and they're clearly listening really loud too. And so I don't want to interrupt. So I let the door close behind me, but I don't want to stand there and block the door. So I just take a couple steps to the left, so I'm not in front of the door, and I'm just leaning up against the wall. And if I look to the left, I can see the big glass window, and there's a drummer in there, and he's playing drums. And the producer and the engineer are facing kind of this way on an angle, kind of a little towards me, and they're both just like this, listening behind the mixing board, and they're looking up a couple times at the drummer and stuff, you know. And I don't want to interrupt. I'm thinking they don't know me. I got a call from a manager that said, "Hey, will you go visit my buddy Brian Howes? He needs bass on this song today." So the song ends, and the producer and the engineer, they start to look up towards me, and I'm about to go, "Hey, I'm Marty. I'm the bass player," you know. And they look straight up at me. And by the way, the song they're listening to, it's a Chris Cornell song. And there's vocals on it, and he's like singing. It's this amazing song, and I'm hearing it like, whoa, like this is like almost like a Black Hole Sun kind of like slow song, but like it's a hook, and I was like, whoa, this sounds like a hit song to me. Like, and I'm gonna be on this song with Chris Cornell. Is this happening right now? And so the song ends with the fading cymbals, and the producer Brian and the engineer Jay, that they both look up at me, and I think they're about to talk to me, and I'm about to say, "Hey, I'm Marty, I'm the bass player," and they look up at me, look me straight in the eyes, or so I think they're looking me right in the eyes, and they go, "Sounds great, Chris. You need anything?" And I'm like, there was a glass window behind me that was just black, right? I'd stepped out of the way from the doorway, so I didn't want the door to hit me in the ass if somebody came in. So the main room is over here, this big glass window. You know, those big 20-foot wide windows for the recording studio. But there was a smaller room off to the side.
Usually the vocal booth is tiny.
The vocal booth is tiny, and I got my back to this glass window because I think they're just listening to a demo and the drummer's playing along with the demo. So they look up at me and they go, "You need anything, Chris?" And I hear Chris Cornell's voice go, "No, I'm good. Maybe just we could just keep doing passes." And I turn around, and I realized Chris Cornell I had my back to the glass. He's recording vocals, and he's surrounded by candles, and he has the light off. So he's in this vocal room surrounded by candles with the headphones and the big microphone. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. We'll just, keep going." So what was happening was they were recording the drums, and they had like a rough vocal, but Chris Cornell was getting vocal ideas. So while the drummer was doing takes, he just kept doing a few takes. Chris was singing along, and every time he did a take, you heard the vocal get a little more stronger, and he was like, you could tell he was like weaving in and out of ideas, and I was just, and so they go, "Hey, Chris is kind of on a roll right now with these vocal ideas." She goes, "You want to just sit down and just kind of hang out?" I go, "Yeah, of course." So I sit down and I'm just watching it all happen. And they just kept going with it. And he goes, "He's really on a roll. We're just going to let him work with the vocal, and we're going to keep doing vocal takes." And they were like, it started getting later, and they were like, I hate to do this to you, would you mind coming back again tomorrow to do the bass? Because we think we're just going to make this a vocal day now because he's on a roll. I go, go with it. Sure. 2 days in the studio with Chris Cornell. Sure. And so we record the song and I'm like, wow, like that. And I'm telling all my friends, I recorded this song with Chris Cornell today. And I go, it's like, not just like an album track. I go, this was like a radio single, like, I was like, this is amazing. So a while after we recorded it, a little while goes back, and I talked to the producer, and he goes, man, Chris loved your playing on that. He goes, he's so excited about the song. He wants to use the same players again and record like maybe 3 or 4 more, like maybe work on more. And he goes, he wants to use all the same players. And I'm thinking like, oh my God, I'm going to be on a Chris Cornell album. Like, this is crazy. So, got to hang out with him a little bit in the session too. And he was super cool. And then like a month goes by and I didn't hear anything about the song. And I reached out to the producer. Hey, what's going on? You still going to do a few more songs? She goes, yeah. He goes, just having trouble scheduling it. He goes, but he loved that one song. He goes, man, when we were in the studio, he goes, every time your little bass thing came around, he goes, there was like a little triplet thing, like a little melody bass thing. He goes, every time that came around, Chris would be in the control room and he would air bass your little part when it came on every time. I was like, that's so cool. So again, another couple months go by and I reach out to the producer. I said, hey man, just touching base. Like, what's going on with that song? And he's still, and I don't know what's going on, man. He goes, and then I ran into him once. It was at the Rainbow Bar and Grill. I said, what's going on with the song? I was like, that could be a movie soundtrack or something, like a single in a movie. That's what a song that is. He goes, oh, you didn't hear? I go, no, what? He goes, Chris pitched the song to the new American Idol winner, David Cook, and Rob Cavallo, the producer that did like Green Day's American Idiot, they go, he's producing the record and they've recorded the song. It's going to be David Cook's first single. It's a song called Light On. And it's an amazing song. And he goes, but they used all different players. Like Rob Cavallo used his guys, I was like, oh my God. So, years later, Chris obviously passed away. And like a couple of years ago, like a big box set came out of like all Chris Cornell rarities. I was looking through the list, like, is it going to be on there? And it wasn't. But the song came out as a David Cook song, and he did a great job. But I still have the Chris Cornell version on my hard drive of him singing the song, and it's amazing, totally amazing.
He's one of those guys that, when he passed, like I just was talking to Chris from the record company, that band, the record company, and we were talking about Chris Cornell and about artists that passed that like hit hard. And when Cornell passed, that one, Dimebag Darrell hit me really, really hard because he had come through so many times, and being at AAF, I knew him. I wasn't best friends with him, but I knew him. We had hung out a bunch of times, and Chris Cornell dying was just gut wrenching because
complete shock too. Complete shock.
And you can attest to this, like when you're thinking about that generation of music, right? The 90s music that we're talking about, like Soundgarden, one of the big bands to come out of Seattle. But his voice, his persona, his essence, like, he just oozed cool.
Oh,
and even the biggest rock stars in the world would nerd out at the opportunity to meet Chris Cornell, to be around Chris Cornell. Like, how loved he was.
Yeah.
I just wonder if, like, he ever really knew.
I know. Probably not.
So influential. I went to the Hollywood Forever cemetery and went when the last time I was in LA, and I went to his grave. Wow. And there was something about seeing his name like etched in granite that really made it real. I was like, oh,
wow.
I have these great recordings of him playing acoustic on my show.
Really?
He did this solo stripped down version of Call Me a Dog off the Temple of the Dog record, which that record I love so much. And it was just, I mean, you know how those radio station visits are. It's like radio stations don't have these big recording studio rooms. Like you come in, you drop your stuff, you plug in. And Chris Cornell just came in. We put a mic on his guitar. He moved the microphone in the studio around, and then he just played. And it was just like, I think he played 4 songs. His wife, Vicky, was there. And after one of the songs, like I forgot that I was the DJ and had to like talk because I just was just sitting there in awe. It was a private Chris Cornell concert for just me and my station.
That's how I was watching him track those vocals in that booth. Just like, whoa.
Yeah.
And then it was like, you can hear the melody taking shape more every time he does a pass through the song. Like it was amazing. Yeah.
The whole songwriting process for people that can't do it, myself included, is this really crazy thing. And did you see that that Beatles docuseries that came out, the Peter Jackson one, where you're watching Paul McCartney write a song that's so famous now.
Yeah, and he just like mumbles it. Oh yeah, Jojo was a girl that thought she was it, and he just mumbled it pulled it out of the air.
And it was so weird to hear him working the parts out, because it's like you're watching someone discover something that it's like watching a baby walk its first steps.
Yeah.
You know how to walk. We know how the song ends.
Yeah.
But to have a seat to be able to watch the creative process.
Yeah.
And to see a musical genius, and I think Chris Cornell is a musical genius, to have a front row seat to watch him craft a melody and a song.
Yeah. That was crazy.
Yeah. That's nuts. So you end up playing for Kelly Clarkson. You end up playing for Celine. You end up tracking a song with Chris Cornell.
Yep. And then the session thing kept going, but then somewhere around like 2008 is when I had made a decision somewhere like between 2004 and 2008. 2004 was when I did that Kelly Clarkson record, 2003, 2004. And I had a good like 4 or 5 year run of like, oh, wow, like I'm in the session world and I could just stay in town. And I love touring, but I was like, there's something amazing about just getting a phone call and just going and plucking on something and like, hold on, now it's a giant platinum record on the wall. And it was just like a half-hour moment. Like it was amazing to me. So I really wanted to focus on that. And I was, but around 2008, all the record labels started crumbling. Like, the whole downloading thing
got weird. Music downloading, like everything changed.
Every record label executive or record label people that had great jobs were becoming real estate agents. Like, what's going on? And that what came along with it was the session world. The sessions started dwindling, and the money was getting smaller, and they were fewer and far between. And the big recording studios were closing, and then producers started doing them in their houses now, which is so common. So by 2010, 2011, I'd run into big producers that have played on, like I've done sessions for, be like, hey man, what's up? I saw you did that record. Like, crack a joke about like, should have called me for bass. They go, yeah, the budgets are a little bit smaller these days. And, I just pluck a little bass on it myself. And, like it seems fine. Like, so the session world was kind of like dwindling, and it was a bummer. So in 2011, it was kind of like, oh man, like the session world is not happening anymore. So I put the feelers out that with friends that I was looking for another tour. Like I wanted to, after 5 years of trying to stay home in LA, I wanted to get back on the road. So I put the feelers out sometime in 2011, like, hey man, just reaching out, letting you know if you ever hear of anything, what's going on. What's funny is me reaching out didn't lead to this, but out of the blue, I get a phone call from my buddy, and he was managing Lita Ford at the time. And he goes, hey man, this is what he said. He goes, Lita Ford. I go, Yeah. He goes, "Is that be something you'd be interested in?" And I was like, I said, well, I said, I am looking for a tour. I've been reaching out. I'm looking, I do want to get back on the road with somebody again. And I go, it seems kind of cocky to me, but I knew that she wasn't doing much. Remember, appeared in the 90s and just, wasn't doing much. And I knew she had come back in like 2009 or something, but because I read music news, I see that she had just done a few shows. And I said, I'm looking for a tour, but I go, but what is she doing lately, And he goes, oh, dude, there's a new album about to come out. Gary Hoey produced it.
Another local musician out of New England.
I love me some Gary Hoey. And he goes, oh, she has a new record coming out called Living Like a Runaway, and she's opening for Def Leppard all summer, starting soon. And I was like, what? But I said to him, this is the funny part, because he was my buddy, so I could talk to him like a friend. I go, dude, I'm interested. I go, but I go, let's be honest, dude. I go, it's Lita Ford. Isn't she looking for somebody with like leather pants and long hair? You know what I mean? Like, let's be honest here. Come on. Like, yeah, I can play the gig, but there's other guys that are I'm thinking there's probably guys that are probably cooler for the gig or that have more of that 80s vibe, I go, isn't she looking for somebody with long hair and leather pants? And he goes, no, dude. He goes, I think it's a perfect fit. And he goes, she's already been on your website. She's seen all the people you played for. And she's like, cool, call that dude up, And he was like, I know Marty. So I get a phone call from Lita Ford, which is crazy to think. Cause I remember seeing Lita Ford once at the Rainbow Bar and Grill. And I remember thinking like, it was one of those mystique things like, whoa, like, because she like lived in the Caribbean or something, and all of us were like, dude, that is Lita Ford in person. That's crazy, And this was like
when you go back and look at like that metal era, for a girl that was in high school, looking at all of these huge bands, there weren't that many women.
Yeah.
That were there kicking the door in. Like the first rock star I ever met when I was an intern at AAF was Joan Jett.
Cool.
And it was like, the first thing I thought was, oh my God, that's Joan Jett. And the second thing I thought was, she's so short.
Yeah.
She's tiny.
Lita too.
But these
I hear
women,
people say that all the time.
like, they kicked the door in for women like me, even though I'm not in a band. Like, they had to show that they could keep up.
Yeah.
And Lita is a fucking badass.
I ended up playing with her for 10 years, and like, obviously she had her big in the 80s, but then you think back, like, wait a minute, 10 years before her 80s career, she was in the Runaways in the 70s. So touring with her, she'll, if you're in a van or you're in a tour bus with somebody and somebody's just telling stories for a while, you kind of start to tune stuff out or whatever. And like, so Lita would be like telling a story like, oh yeah, we were on this houseboat and we were doing this, and oh, we were eating off these plates and we were throwing the plates in the water in the river. And I'm, I brush it off, and then she'll mention like, yeah, so then Sid Vicious or whatever. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, who are you talking about? She's like, the Sex Pistols. I'm like, this story that I'm half listening to is about you with the Sex Pistols? And then you remember like, oh, that's right. Like, I mean, she's got stories like, she missed her high school graduation, and her dad had to go to the high school, Long Beach High School. He had to go pick up the diploma in person because she couldn't make it to the graduation because she was on the road with the Runaways and the Ramones at the time. So anyway, touring with Lita. So anyway, I took that gig, and it was, like I said, she was opening for Def Leppard the whole summer. So that was amazing. So that was the next chapter of my thing, was the Lita Ford gig. And the funny thing is, like, I told you, I spent this whole career playing for all these bands for short periods, that I just accepted the fact that when you tour in a band as a hired gun guy like me, it's a short-term thing. That I just accepted that. So I'll never forget, because when I got the gig with Lita Ford on this Def Leppard tour, I remember my first post that I put up on Facebook about it, just like my private Facebook, just letting my friends know. I just assuming it was just a short gig. I actually put, hey, I took a job for the summer. Here are the tour dates. I'm playing for Lita Ford. We're opening for Def Leppard all summer. But I took a job for the summer. And 10 years later, I played with Lita for 10 years. And I just couldn't believe, like, as the years went on and people asked me, like, how long have you been playing for Lita for? I'm like, I only see 7. I'm like, oh my God, it's been 8 years. Like, I've never had a gig last that long, you know? And so, I just left the gig a year ago because of the Daughtry gig. And it was a hard decision, but so the Lita gig was a 10-year thing that I never expected to be 10 years. And it was awesome. She is awesome.
And then you leave and Daughtry, and I've had him on the show, and was really candid about, you know, coming out of that American Idol machine and all of the people having their fingers in his sound and what they wanted him to be like and whatever. And now he really feels like he's in control of his own musical destiny for the first time.
Absolutely.
So joining Daughtry, you joined at the right time when he's calling all the shots. Yep.
And that's kind of a interesting story how that happened, because, you know, I told you way back with the Ben Moody stuff, when I was playing for all these pop sessions, Ben Moody co-wrote songs on the first 2 Daughtry albums. And I played demos. I played on Daughtry songs, not on the albums, but the demo versions. So I never met Chris back then, but Ben Moody and other people, you know, because I was in that machine of songwriters, and everybody, they were just writing pop songs and trying to get them placed. And American Idol was so big at the time. It was like, hey, we're working on this song we're going to pitch to David Cook. Hey, we're working on this song. We're going to pitch it to David Archuleta, you know, whatever. Sure, I'll play on whatever you want. So I played on several Daughtry songs back in the day, and I still have the charts with the date on them. And a couple of them became like pretty big songs, but I'm not on the record, but I'm on the demo, and Chris's voice is on the demo. So about 5 years into his career, he's probably on like his 3rd or 4th record or something. And I was at the Sunset Marquee in Hollywood, which is like a bar and a hotel. And I saw Chris
Where
Daughtry
everybody is, by the way. That's like one of the places.
Yeah, like I saw Jimmy Page and Robert Plant at the lobby, like talking to the lady at the desk once, like, oh my God, this is good. So it was late at night, and I see Chris Daughtry across the bar. And so this was like 5 years earlier, I played on some Daughtry demos, but I'd never met him before. So I just walked up to him and I said, hey man, I just want to introduce myself. I said, I actually played on some of your demos. Like, I go, your voice is on them too, like working demos back. He's like, really? What songs? And I just rattled off a couple songs, and I go, whatever the ones that, you know, Ben Moody and David Hodges wrote together. And he goes, oh yeah. And he goes, what's your name? I said, Marty. And he goes, Marty O'Brien? I go, yeah. So he actually knew. So good memory, because I guess he knew some of the players that
better
had played
than
on his
Sharon
stuff.
Osbourne's memory.
Yes. Yes. And so it was just, you know, just casual, cool. Oh, cool to meet you, you know. And then there was just all these, as the years went on, I would just keep running into him at different places. And he was always super cool. Like, hey man, how you been? What's going on? You know, like there were a couple festivals that I played with Lita Ford that they happened to be on. One time I was with Lita Ford, and we flew into some state to play a casino, and we had a night off, and Daughtry was playing that night. So I texted him and, hey, what's up? And you know, got to hang out a couple times. So we've crossed paths over the years. And then, so this is the really funny part. So January of 2022, the bass player, Josh, who had been in the band like 15 years at that point, he posted something on social media saying, hey, you know, I'm leaving the band after 15 years, and I just want to spend more time with family and things like that. He announced he was leaving. So, I mean, I was completely happy with the Lita Ford gig, but I'm sitting there on my couch, and I read that social media post, or maybe it was the next day I was thinking about it. I'm sitting there with my coffee, and I'm contemplating like, ooh, like, should I reach out about that gig? In my head, I'm thinking, because I know him, I know Chris, and I was thinking, ooh, that might be good. That might be a good move for me. But I'm talking myself out of it, like, oh, you know, all my friends are jealous of having the not jealous, but like finding a gig as a session player or a hired gun guy like myself.
And a stable gig for 10 years with Lita.
Long term is hard to find. Like all my buddies are like, God, that Lita gig just keeps on giving. Man, you're just like, you guys are always busy. So I'm grateful for that and aware that that's a great thing to have. So I'm sitting on the couch and I read this post about them needing a bass player. And I was like, ooh, like that might be good for me. But then I'm talking myself out of it. Like, no, happy. If it ain't fixed, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. Been in this gig 10 years. I don't need to mix things up. Like, it's all good. But then I'm thinking, ooh, but that would be really good. Like maybe I should reach out about that. I'm having an internal argument in my head. And as I'm sitting there with my coffee being like, ooh, should I reach out? No, I haven't talked to Chris Daughtry in probably a couple of years. Just occasional texts here and there, We're coming right out of COVID. This is January 2022, so I hadn't seen him in person in a few years. And I'm sitting there like, ooh, should I reach out about that? No, you got a gig. My phone goes off. Bing. Hey man, this any chance you're available? I'd love for you to come out. It's Chris Daughtry texting me. Any chance you're available? I'd love for you to come out and do this tour with us. Like, what? That's the weirdest coincidence. I'm like, so the crazy thing is I had to turn it down at first. He goes, at first I said, you know what? I would love to. That'd be very cool. And he said, okay, cool. He says, we're leaving in 2 weeks. And I was like, and I had to turn it down. I said, wow. I said, I can't leave in 2 weeks. I said, in just a few days, I have a couple shows with Lita Ford. And then we get on this, Monsters of Rock. I think it was Monsters of Rock cruise. I think it was Monsters of Rock cruise. I'd done a bunch of cruises with her. And then I said 4 days after that cruise, I'm on another cruise called Shiprocked. I was just going on that cruise as a guest. Like they do this thing called the Stowaways. So I was jamming. I said, so I have 2 cruises that are 5 days long each. And I said, so I'm stacked up for 3 weeks. And I said, these are all gigs I could never quit, like on such short notice, And he goes, oh, that's cool. I understand, say sorry it didn't work out, I go, yeah, of course, And at first I was like, ooh, that would have been good. Like maybe that was meant to be. No, but because it couldn't happen, I just pushed it out of my brain. Like, don't even think about how cool that could have been because it can't happen. I can't quit gigs, And so then maybe 4 or 5 days later, I see a post on the internet from there's a guy named Barry Squire who helps bands like find musicians. He organizes auditions and all that. So a post went up about Daughtry seeking a bass player, and I saw that and I was like, oh man, I was like, was that meant to be? And I just messed it up because I had gigs. It's like, oh. So I texted Chris again and I said, hey man, I said I'm sure whoever you get on bass to do this tour is just going to end up being the guy. I'm sure that's how it is. You find somebody and they just work out. I said, but if for some reason the guy doesn't work out or the guy you get is a temporary guy, I was like, if it's a temporary guy, I said, I'd be very interested in the gig long term. I just can't do it right now, And he wrote back, oh, cool. Good to know. And I thought he just kind of shrugged it off like, oh, good to know. Like we have a guy, but good to know, But then an hour later, he texted me and he says, hey, can my manager call you? I was like, sure. So the manager called me and we had a chat and they were all gung ho. And like, it's funny is I thought the phone call was going to be more like, kind of like an interrogation. Like, who are you? Chris had to call and what's going on? And it was the opposite. They were all on board right away. They were like, okay, cool. So, we're thinking we're going to either have you start in May or maybe in June. We're not sure. We got a temporary guy that's going to play for the next month. And, as it gets closer to May, we can truck all your road cases out to Nashville and get things going. And I was like, okay, cool. And it all just happened really fast. And whenever my friends ask me like, hey, how's that Daughtry gig going? I always tell them that like, I knew that every aspect of it would be great. I knew the shows would be great. And the tour, obviously they tour at a high level of, big shows. So I knew all that stuff was great. But I knew Chris, but the one what if was, is the hang cool? Are they all cool people? Is it a, fun working environment? So that was the one what if. You never know. And I got out there, and they're all super awesome guys. Like, I genuinely look forward to seeing everybody when we're back out. And it turned out to be a great move for me. And it's been over a year now. Like, it's funny, I had the gig set for about 3 or 4 months, but I couldn't really tell anybody yet, and then finally, but maybe about a month ago was my 1-year anniversary of actually playing shows with them, and it's been great so far. It's been super fun.
It's such a crazy, hilarious, roundabout story, the way that you can put a career together like that.
Yeah.
And the stories are, I mean, you've got filing cabinets full of stories.
I do have crazy stories. Sometimes I need to hold back because I think, have I told the story already? But, yep.
And you think about all of those artists too, like, we were talking about Cornell and Dimebag or Lemmy from Motorhead. Like,
yep.
It's kind of insane to think about all of the artists that you and I, more you than me, but you and I have come across over the last few decades of our careers that are gone.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Like, when I went to California for that work trip and I went and saw Chris Cornell at the cemetery, one of the other things I wanted to do was go see Dio. And so I went to Dio's grave, and it's got the big thing with the planters, the devil horns.
Yeah.
And somebody was like, well, Lemmy's over there.
He is.
And I was like, holy shit, no way. And like, yeah, Lemmy and Dio kind of stare at each other for eternity now at the cemetery. And like,
every time I'm there, I go, because I've taken friends up there to see it and stuff like that. And every time I'm there, I go, hey, let's just, now that we've seen Lemmy and we've seen Dio, I said, we're just going to go for a walk. I said, every time I go for a walk, I stumble across somebody else super famous. Like, right at the entrance of where Dio's grave is, there's Betty Davis. It's like a big angel. But the new one that I found, so when you're facing Dio's grave, if you walk to the right and you walk a little bit on this path, there's like an archway, and you walk through the archway, and I saw this statue of these two angels together, huge statues. And I just like, wow, I wonder who that is. That's a pretty elaborate grave. And I walked towards it, and it says Carrie Fisher. It's Carrie Fisher and her mom together in one grave.
Debbie Reynolds and Carrie Fisher.
They died within a day of each other, and they're right near Dio. I'm like, that is amazing. Princess Leia is right over here near Dio.
Those cemeteries are crazy.
Yeah.
Because there's only a few places in Hollywood, and like, if you got the money to go everybody's there.
Yeah.
Like, I saw Liza Minnelli's grave. And
it
was
wow.
like, she's got a whole mausoleum. And you just go wandering through, and you're like, wait, I know that name. I know that. And it's not even like Mel Blanc, who did all of the Looney Tunes voices. Like, I saw his grave, and it was just like, you just start wandering around, and you bump into.
Yeah.
Like, right across from Chris Cornell is Toto from The Wizard of Oz.
Oh, yeah.
And it's right next to is it Marky Ramone?
Oh, yeah, with the guitar.
Yeah. One of the Ramones is buried right next to Chris Cornell.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So it's just those cemeteries, and I've always been that person that I love walking through cemeteries. Like, I don't look at it as a sad thing. Like, I just love walking through. It's always peaceful, and reading, you can always tell a lot about somebody based on the headstone and stuff. So I walk through cemeteries all the time.
Yeah, that one where Dio is, the forest lawn, is just amazing.
It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean,
and you could just go for a walk and just be like, watch, we're gonna spot a random person of history that we just didn't like. Oh my God, there's Frank L. Baum, the guy who wrote Wizard of Oz. Like, what? It's right here.
And that's where Michael Jackson is a building. You can't even go in the building.
Oh, yeah,
He's at Forest Lawn, and like.
Yep.
So anybody that's listening, that if you've never been to LA or Hollywood, like, you've got to make time to go to the Hollywood Forever, which is in the middle of all the movie studios.
Yep.
And then Forest Lawn is like this big sprawling cemetery that's just
amazing.
And everybody's there, and you just kind of wander around, and
it's incredible.
Yeah.
in that cemetery, there's like 3 or 4 different churches. Like you just drive. It's like a huge park. You drive around. It's almost like Central Park. And there's just these little churches where, if you have a ceremony there, you can do it. And one of the churches in there is an exact replica of the famous church in Boston, downtown Boston. There's like a famous like first church or something like that. I forget what it is.
Well, there's the old North Church, that one.
I'm not sure which one it is. I need to look it up. But there's a church in Forest Lawn Cemetery that's a replica of the Boston church.
That's crazy.
Like down to every beam and everything. I'm like, I've heard that. I was like, that is crazy. Yeah, pretty wild. It's all connected.
When I talked to Chris from the record company, he lives close to there and and goes walking there all the time. By Hollywood Forever. And he said during COVID, that's what a lot of people were doing is they were walking through cemeteries because they wanted to get outside and get exercise, but didn't want to see anybody. So I guess if you're trying to avoid people, going for walks in the cemetery is probably a good place to go.
Have you been to the Dime Bag?
I have.
Out there?
So I had always wanted to go while Vinny was still alive. But right before COVID, I went to Dallas with my now husband, and I had never been to Dallas before. And he was like, well, what do you want to do? I said, I want to do 2 things. I wanted to do 3 things. I want to go to Dealey Plaza to see where JFK was assassinated.
Oh, yeah.
Because my husband is in the military and he's quite the marksman. So I wanted to go with people that know about bullet trajectory and all of that kind of stuff so that I could look.
That museum is fantastic.
So I didn't get to go to the museum. I want to go back, but we've all seen the Zapruder film. Like we've all seen the famous footage of Dealey Plaza and the assassination.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't believe how small it was because for some reason I thought it was going to be so super big, and it's not. The second thing I wanted to do was go and see Vinny and Dime, because by the time I got out there, Vinny had passed as well. And then I also wanted to go find Dave Williams from Drowning Pool.
Oh, yeah.
Because I saw him, when Drowning Pool hit, they were one of those AAF bands.
Yeah.
And I saw him on the Ozzfest just a couple weeks before he passed.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, I want to go and find Dave Williams. So me and my now husband and a bunch of friends on motorcycles, we all went riding around and we found Dave Williams' grave. And then we went and I navigated, like I had Googled the cemetery where Vinny and Dime are. And they were like, well, where in the cemetery is it? And I was like, I don't know. But I know what Dime's grave looked like because I had seen pictures of it. So I was like, well, once we get to the cemetery, I'm sure we'll figure it out. And we pull into the cemetery and there's a bunch of us on Harleys and we're riding around and I see a group of people in black hoodies.
And I
was like, that's where we're going. And sure enough, we go over there and they hadn't put the iron fencing up yet.
Oh, yeah.
So we were able to take pictures with the graves and we brought a bottle of Crown with us. And as we were getting ready to leave, another group of people found their graves because of us. Because I guess no one else in that cemetery should have people looking like us visiting them. Yeah. And so as we were getting ready to leave, these other people came up and they were like, oh, yeah, we had a feeling this is where their graves were because we saw you guys.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And
man, those guys were so great. Like talk about setting the tone of how to treat opening bands. And, I've been on, like I said, being like the hired guy, I've been on tours where you're opening for bigger bands all the time. And I've been in bands that are, the band itself is pretty big, but you're opening for a bigger band and you're told don't go down those hallways. Any hallways with black curtains, you don't go down there. You don't go down there. Like you're told this is such and such's area. These are your hallways. And man, Pantera, I've been in their dressing rooms on the Ozzfest or whatever, and they'll have 30 kids from the second stage in their dressing room pouring those shots. Everybody they'll see a guy out in the hallway. Hey man, come on in. They set the tone for how to treat opening bands, and they were just so cool to everybody on the road.
I interviewed Dave Grohl a few years ago at Fenway on the tour where he broke his leg when he had the throne.
Yeah.
So first of all, I'm nerding out because I'm in the Red Sox dressing, like the locker room, because that's the Foo Fighters dressing room. And Dave was on like the little scooter, and I'm sitting there. It was me, Dave, Pat Smear, and Taylor Hawkins. And we were talking about Pantera, and Dave Grohl said, I learned how to be a rock star from those guys. That they were nice to everybody, that they never had an ego, that they made friends with everybody. He goes, when bands tour with us in the Foo Fighters, I always just go storming into their dressing rooms with a bottle of something, and I always want to have a drink and sit around and tell stories. And everybody that tours with the Foo Fighters talks about how Dave Grohl is like that, but he says, no, I learned that from Vinny and Dime.
You want to hear the craziest story ever as far as them being like just amazing to opening bands? So it's on the Ozzfest, right? And it's just like a week into the tour, and I think we had a day off, and I'm in some restaurant that's like in the lobby of a hotel, and Rex from Pantera walks in, and I hadn't met him. I mean, I met him when I was like a kid, seeing some Pantera shows I saw him at the Channel when I was a kid once, and I met them all, but whatever. And so I'm in this like restaurant. Rex walks in, and he goes, "Hey man," he goes, "You played for Tommy Lee, huh?" I go, "Yeah." And now I played Spectre basses, and he played Spectre basses. And when I was a kid, like, I always wanted a Spectre bass, but couldn't afford one. And then when I got older, I saved up all my money. I was able to buy one. And when I was a kid, I used to like draw them on my notebooks in school. It was like the wannabe Spectre bass player guy. So he walks in, he's like, "Hey man, I was checking out your basses. It's pretty cool. Yeah, you got some 5 strings. They're cool." And now he had his normal Spectre basses, but he had this one certain Spectre bass that was shaped like a Gibson Thunderbird, and it was his signature model. And he was the first person that in the world to ever have a Spectre signature model. And I knew that this was the first one, and it was a big thing. So he goes, "Hey man, I want to ask you, what do you think of my signature model?" And I was like, first of all, the fact that you have a Spectre signature model at all is unbelievable. I was like, I used to draw these things on my notebook when I was a kid. I go, the fact that you have your own signature model is insane. That's like incredible. And he goes, "What do you think of the shape?" He goes, "You like the shape?" I go, "That's amazing. You got your own shape. It's unique, And he goes, "Oh, that's cool." Now I've known him for maybe 10 minutes. We're just talking basses, right? And he says to me, "Oh, that's cool. I'm glad you like it." He goes, "I'll tell you what," he goes, They just made 2 more for me, and they're being painted right now. And he goes, "When those 2 get shipped out to me," he goes, I'm gonna give you that prototype, the first one." I was like, "What?" Like, I heard him clear as day, but I literally went, "The fuck you just say?" Heard him clear as day. He goes, "When the 2 new ones arrive, I'm gonna give you the prototype." I was like, "Oh wow, thanks." Like, it was so unbelievable. I was like, did I mishear that? Like, what was that? So a couple weeks later into the Ozzfest, right, I'm in the catering, and now, catering is full of all bands. There's bands of all walks of life. Some of the second stage bands, some of the guys in Tool, like everybody's just sitting there eating. And something goes off over the radio, all the Pantera crew guys radio. I hear my name. "Anybody got eyes on Marty, Tommy Lee's bass player?" And somebody goes, "Yep, he's up here in catering, probably with the mashed potatoes or something." And he goes, send him down to the Pantera room. Rex wants to see him." I was like, all right. And so all the people in catering heard this, and they're all looking at me like, what? Like, somebody made a comment like, "You're getting summoned to the Pantera room? Like, what is that all about?"
Got called to the principal's office.
So this was in, I think it was in Holmdel, New Jersey, or one of those shows that's really close to New York City. So I go down, and Pantera's dressing room is like in this long hallway, and the whole hallway was just filled with all of the New York City metal music industry people, Concrete Marketing, and like everybody that you know from the whole scene, everybody. And the hallway was filled with people just chattering. And anytime the Pantera dressing room opened, everybody be peeking in like, "Oh, what's going on in there?" And so I just walk down the hallway like somebody, and I knock on Pantera's dressing room door, and door opens up, and their security guy, Crusher. Yes, his name was Crusher. The security guy's name was Crusher. I think it's actually on his birth certificate. He opens the door and he goes, "Oh," and he goes, "Rex, Marty's here." And he goes, "He'll be right out." And he shuts the door again, So I'm just standing in front of the door, and the whole hallway is filled with probably 20 people, just all chattering, blah, blah, All of a sudden, the door swings open really hard, like it hits the wall. He's probably doing it to be dramatic. He swings the door open. He's got this bass in his hand, and he shoves it in my face and says, "Merry fucking Christmas. Get your own goddamn case." And he hands me this bass without the case. I was like, oh my God. Now the hallway full of people, of all these friends of mine that I know that work in the industry, the whole hallway just went silent, and he gives me the bass, and I can't remember who it was, but somebody broke the silence and just went, "No fucking way." and then everybody's like, "He just gave you that? Like what?" So I'm going to bring it to my bus, and I'm walking through catering, and you don't usually see instruments in catering. So I'm walking through catering with one of Rex's basses, the one he's been playing on stage for the past 2 weeks on Ozzfest. And all the bands are sitting there eating. They're like, "He did not just give you that." Like, I go, and so I put it on the bus. It lived in my bunk for like the whole rest of the tour.
I slept with it and spooned with it every night.
Well, when I slept, I would put it in the back. Tommy Lee's buses always had a recording studio. The back lounge was a recording studio, so I would put it in the back there. But during the day, it would go, and I'd tuck it in. And so anyway, on the back of the headstock, it's handwritten by Stuart Spector, and it says Stuart Spector, and it says Rex prototype serial number 001. It's the first Rex Pantera signature model ever, and he gave me the prototype.
Please tell me you still have it.
Absolutely. I will never get rid of that. Yeah.
Because you got a bunch of stuff hanging on the walls behind you. I'm like, please tell me that you didn't get rid of it.
No, but this is a really interesting story. Being a East Coast Boston person, this bass right here, right? I've owned this bass for probably like 30 years, maybe. I bought it in the mid 90s. I played this bass on every Kilgore show I ever did, the entire Ozzfest. After Ozzfest, we did an entire North American tour with Slayer. Then we went to Europe and we did a tour with Fear Factory. So anyway, Ozzfest. So I've owned this bass almost 30 years, right? Guess what? This bass is Pat Badger's Spector bass from the Get the Funk Out video. When the video starts and he's playing that intro, doom, 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 boom, that's the bass. I bought it off him in like 1996 or something like that. And so he owned it probably like only 6 or 7 years, and I've owned it probably 25 or 30, actually probably 30 years.
God.
Yeah. So any picture you see of me as a young kid playing on the Ozzfest or with Kilgore, it's the Pat Badger bass from the Get the Funk Out music video.
That's so crazy.
Isn't that random? Crazy, right?
And now those guys are like back in such a huge way too. They released that huge record. Man. People losing their minds about those Nuno solos and stuff. It's insane. Yep. It's insane.
It's so cool to see them back.
Yeah.
I have a kind of a funny extreme story. I let Nuno borrow a bass, a 5-string Spector bass. It's on the road with Daughtry right now. But like 5 years ago, I let him borrow this, and I believe it's on that new Extreme album. I think he used it on a track, or because there was one song that needed 5-string or something. He needed a 5-string bass, so I let him borrow. It was like 5 years ago, and about maybe like 7 months ago or something like that, I needed that bass back because I needed a 5-string for some Daughtry stuff, and I called him up. I said, "Hey," I said, "you still have that bass, right?" I said, "Can I stop by and grab it?" I go, "Yeah." And he's usually just at home working on music up at his studio, He doesn't live too far. And so I go over there and I pull up, and Kevin, the bass player for Extreme is sitting on the front steps of his house.
The drummer. Kevin's the...
Yeah. Kevin. Yeah. Sorry. Kevin, he's sitting on the front steps of the house. And it's unusual to see these guys out here because, like, Nuno's the only one that lives out here. And I pull up and I was like, what are you doing here? And he's like, oh, we're here shooting a couple music videos. And I go, the album's finally coming out? That's all. Because, they paused it. It was supposed to come out and then COVID hit. And I was like, that's great. So I go upstairs to grab the bass from Nuno. And Kevin walks up with me. And all of Extreme is in the kitchen. I'm like, this is weird. I'm getting the bass from him, and we talked about that bass because
I was gonna ask, does Pat know you still have that bass?
Yeah, and he always cracks jokes. Yeah, if you ever sell it, it's like, hey, man, I'm never selling it. I owned it. I've had it like 30 years, and but anyway, it was just funny to walk up and they were all like in the kitchen. I was like, this is weird. What are you guys all doing here? They were shooting 2 music videos apparently, so I think they did a couple back-to-back videos. So
I talked to the DeLeo brothers about instruments and how once there's a memory associated with them, whether it be that you wrote a song on it or a tour or something, like they're impossible to get rid of.
Yeah.
And the longer your career, the more of these things you acquire to the point where you're like, what am I going to do with all of this stuff?
Yes, I'm selling a bunch of stuff actually, but the sentimental stuff is going to stay with me. But I am going to be selling some random stuff that I'd have to. As you can see, I have so many random ones. Yeah, but yeah, I knew you'd get a kick out of that because most people don't know that Spectre bass that I played with Kilgore forever is actually the Get the Funk Out bass.
That's freaking hilarious.
Yeah, and I love it. I adore it. So
what's going on with Daughtry now? What are you guys planning on doing you're going on the acoustic tour?
Yeah, there's an acoustic tour coming up. That's pretty much all of August and all of September. So it's 2 months of an acoustic tour. But what's kind of cool is like about once every 2 weeks thrown in there is an electric show, like a random festival or something. So we'll be on the road doing the acoustic tour, but then probably shoot off and do like a big festival or something. I know we're doing like Rocklahoma, maybe that's later in the year, but like we have some other like Aftershock, Rocklahoma, a bunch of things coming up.
Isn't Aaron Jones playing that acoustic tour with you guys?
Yeah.
He's great.
Yeah, he's awesome. He was our opening act in the UK. In March, we just did a 2-week UK tour, and he was on there. Yeah, he's great. Him and his band are awesome. Yeah. Looking forward to that. And yeah, there's new music being written right now. Daughtry, Chris is working on songs right now, and heard some new stuff. I played on a new track that's probably coming out sometime. I'm not sure when. I'm not sure what the plan is, but it's pretty awesome. It's exciting time because it's like it's a little heavier direction and just he's doing really what he wants to, and it's just awesome. Everybody's excited, and yeah, it's looking like it's going to be a super busy next year. But this year it's mainly that acoustic tour. And I leave on Tuesday actually for a week in Canada. We have 3 shows through the week in Canada, Niagara Falls, and a couple of festival, and yeah, it's gonna be fun.
Do you get home often to see the fam?
I mean, I always go back for the holidays, and then usually sometime in the middle of the year, if there's like, I always try to plan it like, oh, I'm playing. There's been so many times that I've played like Mohegan Sun
or Foxwoods or something.
One time, with Lita Ford, you play those places like once a year. One year we played Mohegan Sun. My family came to the show and I went home with them, and the next day was Mother's Day. So I just stayed, and then another trip. I think we played Mohegan Sun, and like 5 days later was Thanksgiving. So I just stayed then, you try to, so I go back for the holiday, like Christmas holidays. And then I just try to connect the dots with touring stuff, visit family. If I'm going to be in the area, I'm like, ooh, I got a few days, I'll stay up here. So yeah, try to get back whenever I can.
When Tommy posts pictures of his penis on social media, do you text him?
I don't. It's a lost cause. You can't control his penis. it's got its. In fact, I think it posted it on its own. I think it actually has its own account, and yeah.
Well, his book is written partially by his penis.
I believe it is, yeah.
Like it has its own font and actually tells stories. If you haven't read, I'm not talking about Motley Crue's book. I'm talking about Tommy Lee's book. Tommy Lee's book, Tommy tells a story, then whoever the story is about tells their version of the story.
Oh, yeah, their version of it. Yeah,
and then Tommy Lee's penis tells its version of the story. Same story. In 3 different fonts. It's really, really funny.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's great.
You just never know what's going to happen with that.
You never know. Yep. That's funny.
I'm glad that we got a chance to catch up and hang
Yeah.
out. And if you're going to be back in New England, maybe around the holidays, maybe you and I can get together and grab some dinner or something. That would be awesome.
We got to. That'd be awesome.
Now that COVID is kind of past and people are traveling, and like I was able to see you in Vegas, which I end up in Vegas at least a couple times a year for work.
Oh, yeah.
More often than LA now, but every once in a while I end up in LA. But the Vegas trips are fun. Like get in and out in like 3 or 4 days. Anything longer than that.
Yeah, that was a random thing. I didn't think I'd see you, and it was like the Daughtry played like a radio convention, and there you were. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's so weird. And I was like, you got to come on the podcast. And you were like, okay.
Yeah.
So,
and it's funny is, if anybody else is like, hey, do you want to do a podcast? Or, it's like, sure. And they think like, okay, like what should I talk about? What could I talk about on this one? But with you, it was like, are you kidding me? Like we could probably go for 4 hours talking about local New England music.
Oh my God. Well, you mentioned the channel and I was like, oh my God. Like legendary music place, legendary music venue in Boston that was like over the harbor.
That how I mentioned Pantera at the channel. I saw Pantera at the channel, and it was on a Sunday afternoon. I was a teenager, and they used to do these shows on Sundays for all ages or for younger kids because the channel was 21 and up.
Yeah, it's the only place when I was in college before I was 21, the channel's the only place that would let me in while I was underage.
Yeah.
Because they always let the girls in.
And so they had these things on Sundays, and they were called metal matinees. So I still have the ticket. It's a paper ticket from Strawberries Records and Tapes, and it's a paper receipt, and it's handwritten Pantera. But it was actually an Exodus show, and it was called Metal Matinee. And on these metal matinees, the doors would open at 11 a.m. and the first band would go on at noon. So we drive down there at like 10 a.m. on a Sunday. The doors opened at 11. Me and my friends got in there. Pantera was in a beat up old RV, and Pantera went on at noon. And then it was Suicidal Tendencies and Exodus headline. And Pantera went on at noon.
And knowing what you know now about Pantera, there's no way they had gone to bed yet playing that show.
No, absolutely not.
There's no way they went to bed.
Yep.
It's so sad because so many of those old great venues are just gone.
Oh, it's a bummer. I lived in those venues when I was a kid. The old living room in Providence, Rhode Island.
Yes.
During my high school years, from 9th grade to 12th grade, those 4 years, I was at every show during the week. I mean like 3-4 nights a week. I saw a band. I saw Guns N' Roses on the Appetite for Destruction tour in that club. 2 weeks after that Pantera show at the channel, Pantera headlined the living room, and there was probably 80 people tops in there, the Cowboys from Hell tour. So many bands I saw that. So, and I was just like, probably too young to be in there. I was like 15 or something or whatever. But
it's so funny because we're telling these stories now. Like one of my professors in college, my English professor, saw all the bands. He went to Woodstock, the original one.
Wow.
Like saw Zeppelin at the Garden, like was just that guy that saw all the shows. And after class, I used to like talk music with him because he knew how much I love music. And I would just sit there and listen to him talk about all, like he was at the show in Connecticut when Jim Morrison whipped his dick out and got arrested. Like he was at that show. This guy was like at every show. But for this new generation of music fans, these shows we're talking about in the 90s and the 80s and 90s, like.
Yeah, they look at it that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I know. It's amazing we made it out alive, dude. It's nice. It's nice. You look healthy. You look good. We made it. We made it out of that crazy period and survived.
We made it. We survived.
Like, how many black tooth shots can you do and still survive? And it's like, I still keep Pedialyte in the fridge because of Diamond Vinny telling me to do that.
You did it. You did it. You survived.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hopefully I'll get to see you on this acoustic tour, and if not, I can't wait to hear this new Daughtry stuff.
Unfortunately, we're not playing in Boston. It's like we play Vermont and Foxwoods in Connecticut. There's like no Boston.
Yeah,
Rhode
I might
Island,
come to the Foxwoods show.
Yeah, hit me up.
All right, I will.
Sweet. I think it's August 26th. I think
it's up on the concert calendar at mistresscarrie.com.
Yes. Concert calendar.
It's up there. Right. So they're all up there.
After we close this Zoom, I'm going to get on mistresscarrie.com and see what this website's all about.
Oh, there's all kinds of stuff. All the episodes of the podcast are there. The video show's up there. You can shop in the online store.
Cool.
The only thing that I have to really do with the website, and I've been totally slacking, and you can appreciate this, is I have to take the time to really get my photo archives up there. Because there's
that'd be cool.
So many pictures and so...
Oh, you should definitely do that.
There's just so much stuff. And I've got pictures... When I had to move out of the AAF like offices and stuff, like I found all of these old pictures where the only copy I have is an actual physical photo that needs to be scanned and digitized. But
did you get double prints at
Oh my God, do you still got the negatives? But I do have to spend some serious time with the photo galleries. That's the only part of mistresscarrie.com that I really need to work on. But the concert calendar, it's concerts and events from all around New England. Because I'm on the radio all around New England now and across the country now.
Wow, yeah.
So the concert calendar. Yeah.
Worldwide.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, go to mistresscarrie.com. It's all there. And I'll have all of your links in the show notes of this episode so people can find you easily.
Cool. Awesome.
Well, I will catch up with you very soon. I appreciate you coming and hanging with me.
Yeah, thanks for the invite to chat. I knew we could just chat. How long do we go? We probably went hours.
Couple hours.
I knew it.
Yeah,
I could go
too.
forever.
I did too. Well, we'll do it again. We'll go back and listen to this one and fill in all the gaps of the stuff we didn't talk about, and then we'll do it again.
Yes.
Maybe next time when you get some time off or you're on the East Coast, you can come hang with me in MCHQ and we can do it in person.
Yeah, let's do another in-person one. We'll talk about reflecting back on the old New England music scene.
Craziness.
Could go on forever.
I know. Well, now they're bringing back the Metal and Hardcore Fest at the Palladium. They're bringing it back.
Oh, my God. Wow.
It's happening in September. They're bringing it back the first time in 5 years. So there's a lot going on in New England with hard rock and heavy metal and hardcore music.
Next thing you know, Loco Bazooka will be back.
Oh, my gosh. That's where I got to sing Walk with Dime, sharing a microphone, one of the highlights of my whole radio career.
Yes.
That picture is up. For sure. I'm
going to go find it.
Yeah. All right, honey. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Good chat. Let's do it again soon.
There he is, the one and only Marty O'Brien. And yeah, we're going to have to do it again because we left out a lot of stuff. You can catch Marty O'Brien out on the road with Daughtry. Get the details on their New England shows. Just go to the concert calendar at mistresscarrie.com. And if you want to check out Marty's discography, all of the different projects he's recorded with over the years, just go to his official website, which is linked in the show notes of this episode. You'll also find all of Marty's social media links, all of Daughtry's links, and all of my links as well. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to the Mistress Carrie podcast. New full-length episodes come out every Wednesday. Plus, each weekday, you get the sit rep, all of your rock news, entertainment updates, and music headlines, and it's all in 5 minutes. And besides, you never know when we're going to release a bonus episode. You can catch me live every Tuesday night at 8:30 on my official Facebook page for my video show, Cocktails in the War Room, and you can always find me on the radio. Get the details on all that and more at MistressCarrie.com. The Mistress Carrie Podcast, a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network.
Trying to grab all the groceries in one trip? Oof, not how you would have done that. You know sometimes less is more. Like when you drive less and save with the USAA annual mileage discount. USAA. Get a quote today.